Hi, I'm Kate, and I'm here at the Canadian Science Policy Conference with Dr. Alan Winter, who is the BC Innovation Commissioner, and Dr. Suzanne Kettley, who is the Executive Director of the Canadian Science Publishing journals. And they have just come here from their panel on science learning in the new generation to answer some questions. So Suzanne, could you tell us a little bit about Canadian Science Publishing? What are the challenges, and what's one thing you're excited about in the new year?
Yes, so Canadian Science Publishing, some of you may remember as the NRC Research Press. Back in 2010, after a program review, the government spun us off into the private sector. So now we're not-for-profit. We're Canada's largest science publisher of journals, and we publish 24 journals. We've been moving into open access publishing recently, so that's exciting, but what I would like to really delve into a little further is how we can create a sustainable open access journal publishing model. So that's what's really exciting to me. Right now, most science journals who are open access, they charge the authors to pay in the journals, and that creates a real barrier, especially in Canada, where the research grants aren't large enough so that authors can afford to pay for open access publishing. So that's something that we're working with the community and bringing stakeholders together to talk about, to see if we can come up with a model that's sustainable.
Okay, sounds good. And Alan, same question. What's it like as BC's Innovation Commissioner?
Well, it's a new world in the sense that there is a new government in BC. They want to have a focus on innovation. And as a result of that, they've set up really a structure for innovation in the sense of an innovation commissioner, that's me, an innovation commission, which was then called Innovate BC, which manages programs. And what's more exciting, I think, about all of that is the Emerging Economy Task Force. This is looking at what do we think the economy will look like in the next 12 to 20 years or so, and what do we think we need to do in terms of education, in terms of university training, in terms of mid-skill training, etc., for that emerging economy.
Okay, sounds good. So, Suzanne, in publishing, what is the role of the publishers in knowledge translation?
That's a good question, Kate. So one of the things that we find is a barrier for understanding of research is the actual format of the scientific article. And so what we started to do is to create new platforms, new ways to disseminate the information. For example, video abstracts is one opportunity for researchers to provide us with a description of their research in a nutshell on video. And what we do is we link out from the abstract, the technical abstract, to that so people can understand it. But we're also looking at text, plain language summary text, which accomplishes the same thing, where we have science writers who are specific in a particular field, and they work with the authors to create an abstract that people will understand what's happening in the science. And we think it's really important that we be able to take the research and help it to be disseminated to more than just researchers. So it could be the general public if they want to learn about a particular topic, if they're interested in science, or it could be a decision maker or even a policy maker.
Right, so open access means people don't just access it, they understand it.
Correct, that's right.
Excellent. And Alan, the technology sector, what's its interest in science learning?
Well, we talk about the technology sector, Kate, but to some extent, and we do define it, in British Columbia we define it by 4 sectors, life science, ICT, digital media, clean tech. Those are kind of what we think of as really technology producing sectors, if you like. But the tech sector, if you look at it really, it permeates all sectors because everybody has a smartphone, everybody knows to some extent to go to tools to help their jobs, etc. So actually, if you look at BC, and it's the same across Canada, some of the most advanced tech companies are actually in retail or somewhere like that. So for example, Lululemon or Arc'teryx, etc., they do their designs, that's all shipped off digitally, it's designed digitally, it's manufactured, it's brought back, it's sold digitally, etc. And so the digital enabled economy is really the whole economy, but the tech sector is the producing part of that tends to permeate through that whole group, if you like, into finance, into retail, into forestry, into all of these different areas. So what we have to understand, I think, as we become more tech-enabled, and we're looking at increasing our GDP and increasing productivity and so on, is how do we use those tools to increase our productivity, increase our GDP as a country, and then we can spend that money in other ways. And so we have to find the best way to have the best talent want to come and work in those areas. And if we can, that's really the interest in having very good methodology, very good organizations and so on involved in the technology education, technology training, mid-career changing, mid-tech jobs and so on.
Right. Sounds good. So, for both of you, and I guess we'll go with Suzanne first again, what do you think is the greatest impact of the conference?
I've been coming to this conference, I guess, for about 3 years now, and I find it's a great source of information for me to find out what's happening at the national level in terms of science policy. And I think Meredith has done a phenomenal job at expanding and bringing a great program together, so I really appreciate that. I love hearing from Mona Nemer, for example, or the Mary, I've forgotten her last name now, from Nova Scotia. It's okay, we can skip that part. But just having that opportunity to find out what's happening at the national level, because science is important to all of us. And as you were saying, it's very important that Canada be competitive. We're in a knowledge-based society, so it's important that Canada be focusing on science, and I think science policy is part of that solution.
That sounds great. Alan, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think the context, to some extent, in Canada and in other jurisdictions as well, is that governments have moved generally away from policy-driven decisions to becoming much more transactional. And I think that's a pity in some cases, because if we're going to make a systemic change, we need to have policies that drive it. And so I see the Canadian Science Policy Conference to some extent filling a vacuum that there is in Canada around what is our science policy, and to some extent what is our economic policy, and how does the science policy link to that. I think other countries that have gone through crises tend to understand that. They have policies around their total investment in R&D, for example. We don't have that sort of thing. So we have governments that are very interested in doing things in innovation, which is great, but we need to be able to put that into more of a context. And that context really is the science policy. So I think this conference gets us thinking in a way that I don't think we would if it wasn't kind of mixed up with, senior policy people from the federal government, people from industry, people from provinces, and particularly the young people who are here, who are asking all the good questions and so on. And that mix, I think, leads to the opportunity for thinking about policy in a different way. So that's why I think the CPSC is a really good institution at this point.
Yeah, well, I hope you've enjoyed your time at the conference so far and continue to enjoy it. Where can our listeners go in order to find out more about your respective work? cdnsciencepub.com. Okay.
And in the case of the Innovation Commissioner, so I report to the Minister of Jobs, Training and Technology in British Columbia, and so that ministry has a website, and on the website there are various ways, if you like, of understanding what's going on in innovation, one of them being the Innovation Commissioner's role.
Right. Excellent. Thank you very much for your time and your insight today. And as I said, I really hope you enjoy the rest of your conference.
Good. Thanks, Kate. Good.